Hey there YouTube. So in this video I wanted to cover the IRS Form 1099 DIV and how this information gets correctly reported on your Form 1040 tax return. So 1099 DIV is an information reporting statement. It's where a broker or a company, if they pay out dividends to you, they need to report those dividends on a 1099 and submit that information to the IRS. And of course you get a copy of it as well. Now, a lot of brokers issue consolidated 1099, so you might not see it in this format. A consolidated 1099 will have 1099 DIV, 1099 INT, 1099B. It'll have all of that information kind of neatly compiled on one form for you, so it makes it easier for you to prepare your return. But if you just own one stock directly, you might get it in this format here. So there's a couple elements here, right? The recipient's name is the taxpayer. Obviously, we have the taxpayer's social security number, and then the payer, right? So in this case, James received dividend income, and some other distributions from this company, publicly traded company Inc. And there's the publicly traded company's EIN. So first things to note, boxes 1A and B, these are the ones that you're gonna see most often, right? So total ordinary dividends, $1,000, and then qualified, $1,000. So what's being reported here, the total amount of cash dividends you'll get that are ordinary is included in this number here, right? So that's $1,000 of ordinary dividends. Qualified is the portion of 1A that is the qualified. So you're not adding these two together to show that you received $2,000. No, you received $1,000 of dividends, and then box 1B indicates what portion of 1A is qualified, and then obviously the difference between the two, if they weren't the same, that would be the non-qualified portion. Box 2A is capital gain distributions. So in some circumstances, a company can distribute cash where it looks like a dividend, but really it's treated as a capital gain. So you have capital gain distributions down here. And then in this example, we also have box 3, non-dividend distributions of $500. So a non-dividend distribution is not taxable income. Non-dividend distributions mean that you're receiving cash that's effectively a return of principal. So it's not a distribution of accumulated earnings for this corporation. It's a return of principal to the shareholder. So that's why it's not taxable, because it's not a distribution of earnings. So let's look over at James's 1040 and see how some of these numbers get transferred over there. So here we have page 1 of his 1040, but we'd like to start with Schedule B. So let me jump down here to Schedule B. This is where you would report your interest and dividend income. So part 1 is interest, part 2 is ordinary dividends. You recall here we have ordinary dividends of $1,000, so that's what gets reported here. Publicly traded company Inc. paid James $1,000, so that's the ordinary amount. Now the qualified portion isn't reported here on Schedule B. It's reported on page 1 of your 1040, right next to the ordinary dividend line item. So we have ordinary dividends here, right, on line 3B, and then the portion of that $1,000 that's qualified is noted here, right? So remember, he received $1,000 of dividends, $1,000 of that is qualified. So he didn't receive any non-qualified dividend distributions. Now this is significant because you recall qualified dividends aren't subject to ordinary income tax rates, right? They're subject to different tax rates, as low as 0 depending on where your income is, or as high as 20%, which is the long-term capital gains rate, right? So that's very important to make sure that you differentiate between the two. Ordinary income here, the ordinary dividend income rather, and then $1,000 in qualified. Now if we go back here, so we've had capital gain distributions, right? So where does that go? Well, capital gains are reported on Schedule D, right, or Form 8949, and then transferred over to Schedule D. So if we look at Schedule D here, capital gains and losses for the taxpayer, capital gain distributions are reported down here on line 13, right? So we have capital gain distributions, line 13, there's that $50, right? So the capital gain distribution is included in his long-term capital gain computation. And then lastly, we have the non-dividend distributions. Now, the field is listed here, and a lot of tax software programs will have you enter this, but really this doesn't show up anywhere on the return. And again, that's because it's not taxable, right? Non-dividend distributions are a return of principal, so it's not a distribution of income, so it's not taxable income to you as the recipient. So the $500, it really isn't going to show up anywhere here. It's not on Schedule D, it's not on Schedule B, it's not reported on page 1 of your 1040 or anywhere else, because again, it's not taxable income because it's simply a distribution of principal. So it's a return of principal to the shareholder. Okay, so that covers the 1099 div, some of the main fields that you normally see. Obviously, there's some other boxes here, but frankly, those aren't as common, so I'm not going to cover those types of examples in this fact pattern. But yeah, so that's the 1099 div and how the information gets transferred over to your 1040. Hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.